And hey, DeWitt, he's back again in his chair. And go live on Facebook. Hey, I'm getting faster. Come on. The fingers are getting faster.
Looks like we're good.
It's very impressive, Cassandra.
I know. I hate the video though where I look like I'm concentrating and leaning in while I do it. So I've got to practice that aspect of me now. Excellent. Now I'm going to mute everyone and Mark will unmute himself.
I shall. So yeah, welcome everybody to the Tupelo Books weekend, which yesterday included Chloe Hunnam, Corey Van Landingham, Maggie Queenie, Michael Haidt with Cutter Streetby, Cindy Savitt and Tyler Mills, and was a wonderful reading. And tonight we have day 2 of the Tupelo Books weekend with Sean Singer, Iliana Rocha, Lawrence Raab, and Nicholas Rigiacorte. And to commence the proceedings tonight, I will introduce our missing co-host, Jonathan Penton, first. Cassandra will read one of his poems. Jonathan founded Unlikely Stories in '98. Since then, he's lent editorial and management assistance to many literary and artistic ventures, including the New Orleans Poetry Festival and Big Bridge. In 2005, he founded Unlikely Books. They publish approximately 3 to 5 books of poetry a year. His own poetry books are Last Chap, Blood and Salsa and Painting Rust, Prosthetic Gods, Standards of Sadity, and free e-chapbook backstories, which you can download from Jeffrey Side's Argotist ebooks.
Wonderful. Alrighty, as Jonathan would say, I have an ekphrastic poem based on a sculpture in a garden, which is a project that he's doing that I really love. And this one is called Diana. It begins, as always, with perfect golden tits, high and tight on the small side, made shapely by an impossibly thin waist. The ass is shapely enough, though there's not a sign of a cunt. One ideal foot balanced on a sphere, which is something goddesses can do, I suppose, balance themselves on one foot, on a ball. It's just a kind of thing on Olympus. Oh, her bow is crafted well enough. The arrow she's clutching is regal. You can tell she's Diana because her hair is in a bun, carved much more texturally than her near adolescent physique. The face looks like a face. Much attention was given to the features, though the expression seems a bit blank. I want to say she's weeping, but I want to say everyone's weeping. How do these things happen? Google will tell me quickly enough. There you go.
Next up, we have our other co-host, Cassandra Atherton, who's an award-winning writer, scholar of prose poetry, and professor of writing and literature in Melbourne, Australia. Her most recent books of prose poetry are Pre-Raphaelite, Leftovers, and Fugitive Letters. She's currently writing a book of prose poetry on the atomic bomb with funding from the Australia Council. Cassandra co-wrote prose poetry, An Introduction, which is an amazing book. I highly recommend everyone get it. It's out with Princeton U Press, and the Anthology of Australian Prose Poetry, which is just as important, of course. She's commissioning editor for Wesley Magazine.
Thank you. I'm back this time with my own. This one is called On Reading Balzac in Isolation. It's one of my prose poems, and my obsession with Balzac comes out in it. At night, I take the stairs to the roof of our apartment and dance the shagreen bone. In blue sequin ball gown and point shoes, my dactyls run across the rick-rack of rooftops. The streets are haunted squiggles of absence, like a page from a Stern novel, torn from its binding and abandoned. I'm not sure if this is freedom or ossification. Each step is a moment of non-existence, an act of loss. I think of a ballerina who kept her split femur together with an elastic band in a wooden box, the sliced bone like honeycomb. Last week, my father told me the world was shrinking, but I can only see it proliferating like a Freudian Irma dream. If there's sorrow in skin, then it's in the separation from a lover's touch. You climb the stairs and take me back to our tiny apartment. Proximity presses like pages in a novel. My sequins leave impressions on your chest like a shagreen talisman. And I would like to introduce the brilliant Mark Vincennes, who is an Anglo-Swiss-American poet, a fiction writer, translator, editor, publisher, designer, multi-genre artist, and musician. He's published over 20 books of poetry, including more recently, A Brief Conversation with Consciousness, There Might Be a Moon or a Dog, Brief Conversation, just out with Gazebo Books in Australia, and 39 Wonders and Other Management Issues, forthcoming from Spite and Dival. He's got The Pearl Diver of Irunmani, forthcoming from White Pine Press, and an album of music, ambience, and verse, Left Hand Clapping, from Tree Torn Records. Vincennes is also a prolific translator, and the regulars know he has translated from German, Romanian, and French. He's published 10 books of translations, most recently Unexpected Development by award-winning Swiss poet and novelist Klaus Mertz with White Pine 2018, and it was a finalist for the 2016 Cliff Becker Book Prize in Translation. His translation of Klaus Mertz's selected poems, An Audible Blue, which he only just finished, and it is fantastic, is forthcoming from White Pine. He's currently working on a novel entitled The Age of Occasions. Vincennes is editor and publisher of Mad Hat Press and publisher of New American Writing. And everyone, he's lived all over the world, from Brazil to China to Iceland to, India. He was born in Matilda Hospital on the Peak in Hong Kong, but he now lives on a farm in rural Western Massachusetts, overlooking Herman Melville's Greylock Mountain, and where there are, here we go, more hoary bats, rabid wolf spiders, and northern red-bellied cooters than people. What's a cooter, Mark?
It's a kind of amphibian.
It's not like a cootie, which is like a germy thing.
No, not at all.
Okay, just checking.
Actually, I was looking up the other day, Western Massachusetts bacteria, because I thought that'd be kind of cool to do.
Just for me, yeah.
Yeah, but I still haven't found anything. Yeah. I guess we're back.
Keep Googling. Dark web. Go dark web.
I guess we're bacteria free, right? Except for COVID, probably. This is kind of more of a flash fiction, and it's called That Night, Trudy Cooked Pinto Beans and Rice. It was all they had at the supermarket, she said, seasoning the pan. It was one of those cast iron ones forged in our own foundries. The coalition takes care of its own. I've never seen so many beans, she said, serving up 4 portions. Thankfully, Adogo had brought along his best old oak single malt. It was smoky and earthy, and you could almost taste the worms. It was immaculate, really. She frittered around with a handful of ancient dried herbs, crushing them in her fingers. Why do you do that? Asked Adogo. It releases the vital elements. It's what gives them their elan, she laughed, serving up. We'll be farting for weeks, I said. Adogo relented and increased our ration to 4 grams each. You know how much I get on this on the black market, he said, taking a mindful sip. I did. I'd paid for it umpteen times. Adogo's malt was available on every speakeasy this side of the river. It was then you made your dramatic entrance, this time in a blonde wig and eyelashes the size of batwing moths. I hope this is a starting point for our departure, you said, plonking yourself in grasping distance of the bottle. Your earrings rattled like keys or chains, mine did too. We ate slowly, sparingly. We nipped on Adogo's Adogo and stared out the window, sealed shut from all the tarnished air. Trudy, too, our cat, crossed the hall and scampered off elsewhere. Adogo said, let's make a toast to the chef. Tonight we ride on carousels. And we did. After our after-dinner doses of oxygen, you brought 3 new canisters that morning, committing all our savings to 3 vainglorious nights. I remember little after that. There was something about a camel and a rowing machine, something else about hedgerows and worlds in collision. I've heard that Velikovsky once said, never a song was sung about where the air meets the water. He was entirely wrong. We all hummed it in our heads, reclined on our lazy boys, breathing deeply. And I'm now delighted to introduce the first of today's Tupelo authors, and that is Sean Singer, who is the author of a discography from Yale University Press, which was winner of the Yale Series of Younger Poets Prize, selected by W.S. Merwin, and the Norma Farber First Book Award from the Poetry Society of America. Honey and Smoke came out from Eyewear Publishing in 2015, and Today in Taxi from Tupelo Press this year. Sean runs a manuscript consultation service at www.seansinger.poetry.com. Welcome, Sean.
Thanks so much. So I'm reading from a new book called Today in the Taxi, which is a book of prose poems about my experiences driving a taxi in New York City, which I did from 2014 until the pandemic started. 1/10. Today in the taxi, I brought a man from Midtown to someplace in Astoria near the airport. He asked me to take him round trip. We got to the address and he waited outside the place and someone came out and handed him a brown paper bag. The man gave the person some cash. Then we left. He asked me to drive him to the E train instead. I don't believe in saints or omens, early winds, or the pink luck of a sunset. I don't see the Lord's love with her incisions and furry ornaments. The vehicle is not just a way to get to the crime, but somehow to bless whatever the journey needs. I use my braking and steering inputs to turn inward or even go down the uncertain road. Anti-venom. Today in the taxi, I got a fare from Parkchester to the Bronx Zoo. She finally came out of the building, put her baby in the car seat and said, "I forgot something upstairs." Then she left the baby in the car and went back inside for about 7 or 8 minutes. I couldn't believe it. I'm a safe person to leave a baby with, but she didn't know that. I was nervous. Some people live without contradiction. I remained calm, though the situation was beyond the job description. Don Bias had a serpent's tooth affixed to the octave key of his tenor saxophone. Perhaps it helped him to push into the wilderness or to ward off evil. One sunny July, Kafka says he wept over the report of the trial of Marie Abraham, who because of poverty and hunger, strangled her 9-month-old with a man's tie she used as a garter. Burnt plastic. Today in the taxi, I picked up a Wall Street type on Park Avenue near 48th Street. He was going to Montclair, New Jersey. His house was on fire and he spent the trip on the phone, barking orders at his wife, his roofer, his contractor, his insurance company, and at me. He kept saying, "Go this way," or "Which way are you going?" He said to someone that there are firearms and ammunition in the house. Periodically, he held back tears. It was a long 25 miles for me, and I suppose longer for him. We got there and the house was burning. The Talmud says, nature rules over all things except the terror it inspires. Days of winter. Today in the taxi, I brought a Chinese couple, parents of a student at Columbia, from Amsterdam Avenue to JFK. The girl was crying, the mother was crying. The parents sat in silence for most of the trip. They didn't speak English and I didn't speak Chinese. I did offer them a little package of tissues. On the other hand, the sun came out and it warmed to 24 degrees. A driver should find a fixed object on the road, such as a sign or a tree. When the car in front passes it, count 3 seconds before his own car passes it. Then add a second for each hazard, rain or darkness. The road is not unlike a little pressed between vessel that the car pushes along its black bloodstream. A psalm instructs that it will be as it is said. Limbo. Today in the taxi driving a commercial real estate type from 43rd and Madison to 57th and Park, I said, Would you prefer to go up Madison or Park? He said, it doesn't matter. Either way, we're fucked. And it was true when a black pier of birds burst from the building like fulfillment. I too seek to weave a memory from foam, a black bottle opener in the blackest bottle and the flow of liquids. You cannot know it, you can see it. General Beadle Smith reported that in April 1945, when they liberated Buchenwald, he witnessed General Eisenhower go to the opposite side of the road and vomit. From a distance, I saw Patton bend over, holding his head with one hand and his abdomen with the other. I too became sick. When the oncoming headlights are too bright, it is said you should look to the side at the lines on the road. You would stop yourself from being blinded and stop yourself to imagine the road ahead unstrung and the rubber against it. Schism. Today in the taxi, a passenger got in and she was crying. I don't know why. We left Astoria for Williamsburg. I gave her a little package of tissues and she went on her way. Kafka said, crying is especially alarming for me. I cannot cry. When other people cry, it seems to me like a strange, incomprehensible natural phenomenon. I thought maybe she was going through a breakup, or perhaps it was a passage in a novel. Some people think of Williamsburg as the hipster apocalypse, and others, the Orthodox, know the Lord is there with them. She's pushing a shopping cart full of plastic bottles rescued from trash cans. Crying literally means to ask for loudly. She mumbles through a drop of salt water, but she's really saying, you are worthy of asking and having your question heard. Who's sorry now? Today in the taxi, it was a couple on the corner of 14th Street and 7th Avenue. The woman was wearing giant ski goggles. She said to me, he said I was the greatest fuck on the planet. I said, that's a nice compliment, and moved on. Martin Buber said, in an encounter, something happens to a person. It is at times like a light breath, at times like a wrestling match. No matter, it happens. The body stays the same, all edge and shell, but the soft part is the anvil of light pushing against the copper envelope. E minor sonata. Today in the taxi driving north on 31st Street in Astoria, a bus went through a red light and nearly killed me and my passenger. Hit with a heavy object, some carry-on with wet fur is misshapen, red, part raccoon, and washed in road light. If ever there was wanting, you have found it. If something was lost, let it be discovered. Dusk's varnish, please swallow the continent whole. Earlier, my passengers were making out like they were the last people on earth. Simone Weil said, attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. Layers. Today in the taxi, I picked up a millennial couple in Williamsburg. At some point, the woman moved her legs so they stretched across to the front passenger seat and rested them on the door handle. I wanted her to keep her feet on the floor, and not just because I fear germs. I almost used the word distracting. I could see the white caps of her muscles and imagine the blood inside them. It was a warm day and the air was sticky. I thought of the Lord having to clean up a kitchen after a TV cooking competition. She uses sponges and cleansers to get it sparkling, almost like a reminder of herself. She thinks desire means to have surfaces so clean, you could lick them no cleaner. City. Tonight in the taxi, I checked the console. I made sure I had plenty of hand sanitizer, tissues, some candy. The traffic invades like a black swarm of spiders' turnings. Everything witnesses everything else. There's 100-fold harvest of faces, each in a window, and each window in a death machine. Floating. Today in the taxi, I brought the famous jazz drummer's wife, Elena, all around Harlem doing errands. Cobb is the last surviving member of the band that recorded Kind of Blue. We went to the bank and to the pharmacy. She let loose with some stories. It was as if his music was not alone waking up from its dream. I remembered a psychiatrist who said, children wake up in the middle of the night, not to see if you're there, but if they're there. I thought of how his wire brushes made this sound like neither fish nor mammal, but this warm ebbing handling a spine. Harlem River Drive. Tonight in the taxi, it felt like path of names. The city night is like the breaking of vessels. I counted to 4 and marked the distances. There seemed to be infinite green lights reflected in the puddles. We live in a time whose motor hums the noises of collapse. Sparks scattered in order to lift the street grid up. The little shifter was set on drive, the pale lighted interior, and 3 maps sent me across boroughs. A monster is made only of nerves. The driver is nothing without the 3,300 pounds of metal slicing the air. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sean. That was wonderful. Next, we hear from Iliana Rocha, who is the 2019 winner of the Berkshire Prize for a first or second book of poetry for her newest collection, The Many Deaths of Inocencio Rodriguez, forthcoming from Tupelo Press. Karankawa, her debut, won the 2014 AWP Donald Hall Prize for Poetry, which was the University of Pittsburgh Press. Iliana is the recipient of a 2020 Canto Mundo Fellowship and 2019 McDowell Fellowship. She has work featured or forthcoming in the Best New Poets 2014 anthology, as well as Poetry, Poem a Day, The Nation, Virginia Quarterly Review, Latin American Literature Today, Oxford American, and Blackbird, among many others. Iliana serves as poetry co-editor for Waxwing Literary Journal. She earned her PhD in literature and creative writing from Western Michigan University and is an assistant professor at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. Her 3 chihuahuas, Nilla, Beans, and Migo, are the loves of her life. Welcome, Iliana.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If y'all could just drop in the chat where you're zooming in from, that would be amazing. I'd love to see where everyone is. And I just want to give my greatest thanks and appreciation to Lip Balm and to the wonderful hosts and to all of my incredible pressmates at Tupelo and to Christina, my wonderful editor. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm going to read the long poem in my collection, The Many Deaths of Inocencio Rodriguez. The book came out in February, and it details the shooting death of my grandfather in 1971, and more broadly, and in a parallel urgency is the social justice movement and the justice system in America. So this poem I'm going to read is going to be called The Texas Seven. And the Texas Seven were a group of inmates that escaped from a prison in Kennedy, Texas, and while they escaped, shot and killed a police officer. Texas Seven. In a garage, sharpening knives, Joseph Christopher Garcia, born November 6, 1971 in San Antonio, Texas, on Texas death row awaiting execution. Shiner Bock arranged on a card table, a family of bottles. I will fight you if you're just gonna kill me. A skull of amber glass, malice, a napkin sticky to the bar where a girl once left her name in lipstick, Jocelyn. Hammers cast their shadows of cheek and neck on walls, a row of Bibles projecting their version of leather holiness, a holster missing a gun. Always a woman at the center of violence, her blue cursive A vein to his wrist, like a lasso humiliating a bull's hind legs, nylon daisy chained around a hostage's prayer. Both trying to crawl deep into the ground's safety with the tick-tock of hoof and elbow. I didn't stop stabbing until he stopped moving. There's no such thing as safety. It's not ambulance, it's not hearse, it's not the boar's head frozen in a snarl, but that's close. Rage. I carry all of them with me. All was ocean. Randy Ethan Halprin, born September 13th, 1977 in McKinney, Texas, on death row, Texas death row, awaiting execution. Babe, you know, when I was talking about nature, I was thinking about a place where we could hear birds or water or a waterfall. Everything from sex to a Sunday drive requires imagination, usurp, coup d'etat, but I no longer require privacy to arouse my wasted neodymium, twinned, pointing in your direction of rose-colored salt I snort until I tarnish. You know the story of my childhood better than I do because yours is the lie I love. Tell me about how I used to fish with Papa, a black bass hooked by the stalled question mark between father and son. I saw his tenderness in the drop point against dorsal fin, scales gone easily against the grain. Non-contact, other than a handshake, like a tulip unwound, every bit of intimacy I've created through electrical signals and two ways, folie à deux, but I want you in Grand Rond de Jambe in there against the Congress Avenue Bridge, where bats shatter the blank silhouette of silence, like a mariachi band's brass and ranchera tenor. No mitzvah for me, just acid trips and the sweltering pantochrome dripping the gulf between, where I fingered Grace Darman's shyness by way of her blistering pearls. A yes in each little sun, a baby's skull of crushed seashells. Hideout Shuttered, Larry James Harper, September 10th, 1963 in Danville, Illinois to January 22nd, 2001 in Woodland Park, Colorado, died by suicide before he could be captured by law enforcement. Brother Jim, brother slouched, brother mantist, cathedral, garbage can, sparkle away from being blessed, from Mary's viscera, templated in our coach lights gold. Pillowcase, A Drought Ends. Patrick Henry Murphy Jr., born October 3rd, 1961 in Dallas, Texas, on Texas death row awaiting execution. No one found me a country. Wander less means nothing when less is all I give. The sky's abstinence, stubborn-headed virgin. I seethe at the offering of Virga. Desire, Martian cloud. I go left, heavy with music. My girl, sharp as a knife, silver aurora, rising thirsty to her throat. Brutality, the difference of coulds. I picked one. Hush, Faye Luker, hush, high school crush. Hearts in a glitter pin, a skyline clustered with want. A nightgown stripped of its best silk, XXX, lake dark. I drowned, lake bottom. Last words. Donald Keith Newberry, May 18th, 1962, Albuquerque, New Mexico to February 4th, 2015 in Huntsville, Texas, executed. Each new indignity defeats only the body, pampering the spirit with obscure merit. Going to die in another prism. Michael Anthony Rodriguez, October 29th, 1962 in San Antonio, Texas to August 14th, 2008 in Huntsville, Texas, executed. The roses smell or grow in the backyard yellow. Masochism. I can't. Sheets of paper. This is between the mattress and bed springs. And numerous photographs, but became more than zoo. Some other world for drones, and so. Meticulous. It looks a little slip up, nip slip. Not that bound Corinthian, running a bomb per dollar, parody, dog collars. I grown a little problem. My dues, strains, selling dishes. Food we had deboned, had beatable victims, prepared as jewelry in the shop, rotated pop lock and shot. $2,000 cost me some other suffering. Maybe not copy scared me, wow. Prevented things are happening after and are moved to another larger prison. Just a bunch of earth involved and leaves us. Black to paint this vehicle with. George Angel Rivas Jr., May 6, 1970 in El Paso, Texas to February 29th, 2012 in Huntsville, Texas, executed. Before language was the afterlife, and before the afterlife, there was violence. The back window we couldn't outrun. Blue and red eclipses turned violet in their urgency, turned cochlear implant, turned shot dead. We kept saying we were lucky. They missed us by 3 cars, but what did we ever know of luck? Yes, we got past the Texas confluence where the Guadalupe meets the San Antonio twang meets drawl. We didn't impersonate anyone we couldn't have been, and that's what was terrifying. How many links is 31 lives? We were not daring, we were survivors. We took care of what little was left of ourselves. Snatch and grab, my friend. Break and enter, pal. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Iliana. Next, we hear from Lawrence Raab, who's the author of 9 books of poems, including Mistaking Each Other for Gods from Tupelo, which was long listed for the National Book Award, and named one of the 10 best poetry books of 2015 by the New York Times. An earlier collection, What We Don't Know About Each Other, from Penguin in '93, was a winner of the National Poetry Series and a finalist for the National Book Award. Lawrence's most recent book of poems is The Life Beside This One from Tupelo. He's also the co-author with Stephen Dunn of a chapbook of collaborative poems, Winter at the Caspian Sea. In 2016, Tupelo published his collected essays, Why We Don't Say What We Mean. A new collection of poems, April in the Ruins, will appear, and I believe has appeared, because I just got a copy this year. He is the Harry C. Payne Professor of Poetry Emeritus at Williams College, where he has taught for 42 years. Welcome, Lawrence. You need to unmute yourself, I think.
Okay. That's okay now?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. Well, thanks, Mark. And indeed, the new book, looks like this, is out and available. So at yesterday's reading, Chloe read a poem that she said gave a nod, I think that was her phrase, to Robert Frost stopping by woods on a snowy evening. So I'd like to begin by reading a poem that borrows a lot more from Robert Frost and from that poem. My poem is called Stopping by Woods. You will note that in my modesty, I've only taken half of Frost's title. And you can imagine that the speaker here is a teacher, though not necessarily me. And he's talking to a student who is reading the Frost poem, and he's advising the student to picture himself inside the poem, stopping by woods. Imagine you were out there also in the snow, not far from those trees that seem to be hiding something. Maybe you are concerned that another traveler, even this late, might see you and stop and ask why you stopped. If you're having some kind of trouble, what would you say? What would you keep to yourself? A few minutes ago, you weren't uneasy. Now you are. And maybe there's a reason, maybe there isn't. But this is a poem. It's not life, where nothing has to add up, which is why you expect you'll be given at the end some useful idea about duty or time to take home and ponder. Yet the snow has disguised so much. You're not sure how long you should wait. And you're tired, aren't you? Watching the snow, lovely as it is, falling and continuing to fall. This poem is called One of the Ways We Talk to Each Other. It's not important, he said. And she said, tell me anyway. But he didn't want to be told what to do. So he said, that's why I won't tell you, which he knew didn't make sense. In that case, she replied, I'm not going to tell you either. They went outside with the dog, where it seemed that being silent wasn't the same as refusal. I'm not quiet because I'm angry, he thought, assuming she felt the same, but she didn't. The dog sniffed at a tuft of grass, tugged on the leash. How can I begin a new conversation? He wondered. And she, well, her mind had drifted off. But whatever occurred to her next pleased her. And as they crossed the street, she took his hand, just as if everything they hadn't told each other had never happened. Perhaps. So there you are on the porch of the house by the lake, where your father and mother sit in that autumnal haze your dreams frequently require. And you're a boy, of course, gazing across the water, waiting for your real life to begin. although you haven't tried to invite it any closer. How alone you were, how much like your father, which you didn't understand. What else couldn't you see? A voice in your dream demands, think about it. So you get up, make coffee, watch the fog drifting as it does in the movies through unconvincing graveyards and bleak English moors. And now the field beyond your lawn. Your father is out there in the tall grass, smoking a cigarette. He's been dead for a long time, but he's still reluctant to talk. You could suggest a few words. He might admit that when he was alive, he also woke early and made coffee and stared out his kitchen window at the houses of his neighbors. Their windows dark, their secrets, like his, intact. And then, he says, I may have felt the way you feel this morning, but I didn't think about it. Should I have thought about it? He knows that yes is the answer you want. Yes, he says, perhaps I should have thought about everything more often. Perhaps I did. Now, you tell me, what difference would that have made? Okay, this next poem is spoken by God. In the present moment, that is a moment in which many people no longer believe in him or are afraid of him. And since God is all knowledgeable, he would know this and would have known it from the beginning. The poem is called God Considers His Losses. Terror, awe, amazement. These are the effects I've always preferred, like suspending a fiery sword in the sky or producing an angel with something important to say. How enthralling it was, how undeniable. But the men and women I made out of dust refused to admit their freedom required obedience. They wanted too much. They wanted to be like me. So I punished them. So they went on inventing one false god after another, burdening themselves with need, wasting their devotion on illusion. They should have been content to remain as children and worship me. Didn't they understand? I wanted to love them. And yet the world changes in ways I could have predicted, but didn't, although I knew I would finally disappear from their lives. After all, I knew everything. But I let my art deceive me. The splendor of an angel's wings unfolding in the darkness. And someone like yourself, waking into this vision, baffled at first, then overwhelmed by all that glorious and fearful, like This is called, this is another persona poem. It's called The Muse Explains, and it is spoken by the Muse to a would-be poet. And the Muse is trying to explain, trying to correct the way in which she has been perceived and misrepresented and misunderstood over the ages. The Muse explains. How hard it is, my lonely boy, or you without me. How jealous you become when you picture someone new whose solitude I've quietly entered, so much like a lover, like one who wishes not to speak to be heard. Now that I've left you, fickle is hard to avoid, unfaithful as well. But those words belong to anybody, and they will disappoint you more than I have. Try to worry a little about this. Also, don't wait for me. I've never actually whispered sweetly in anyone's ear or floated around with a harp dressed up in some gauzy outfit I wouldn't in a million years have chosen for myself. In fact, I come and go without a fuss. You'd hardly notice me if we passed on the street, and we have, but I'm patient. I can wait for you to hear what I don't want to say. What if I stood even closer? If I always only listened? And the last poem is called False Dawn. As you may know, false dawn is the hour or so of thin light before the actual rising of the sun. Until I looked up false dawn yesterday, I'd never heard that light referred to as thin, and it struck me as very beautiful. False dawn. The monasteries were closed. The monks who remained lit candles to pretend the darkness was permanent. And some were troubled in the false dawn. Had loving God become too difficult? Silence enfolded them. In this way, they were like us, as we lie in bed, sleepless, watching the headlights of cars slide across the ceiling, remembering when we took our lives for granted. The monks had been taught to welcome death. What was there to lose except the body and its troublesome secrets and needs? They lit their candles because they always had, and because repetition is a comfort, the shape of a day falling into place as if it belonged to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. As if it belonged to us. And next we hear from Nicholas Rigiacorte, who was born and raised in southern Maine. Since that time, he's lived in Florida, gone to college in Virginia, worked on roofing crews, worked in a deli, and earned his MFA in poetry from the University of Iowa Writers' Workshop. He's had the good fortune to live in Italy, once on a Fulbright year in Campania, the second time as a visiting professor in Florence. His poems have appeared in Denver Quarterly, Phoebe, 14 Hills, Copper Nickel, New American Writing, Descant, Bennington Review, Colorado Review, and elsewhere. His book of poems, American Massive, is forthcoming from Tupelo Press. Nicholas is also an associate professor at English at Knox College in Galesburg, Illinois, where he lives with his family. Welcome, Nicholas.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Cassandra and Christina, wherever you are. And also Sean and Iliana and Lawrence. What good company. I'm really happy to share it with you. So I'm going to read some American Mastodon poems, which comprise most of the collection American Massive, and it concerns one American Mastodon and his witting and unwitting attempts to join the human family. So this first one, he is attempting to get to see his mother and wades through security. So it's two voices, that of the Mastodon and TSA agents. American Mastodon wades through security. I'm no terrorist. I just have to get down to my mother, who's sick. But the agent says, okay, we'll sort this out in the basement. Look, I say, pulling bills from my change purse like a magic hanky. Look at this mouth sprung wide open. This money, but nothing vouches. Amen, amen, if you'll only come with us. But you see, she's the one who crushed wasps in her hand. She uses too small a knife for too large an onion. She invented Kettle Cove. Tut, tut, if you'll calm down, they say. Two men to a tusk. Kettle Cove and that jetty, the whole idea of jetty that splits the current and shelters gentle beach. Sure, sure, you're friendly, aren't you? Now 3, now 4 men to a tusk, wanding my ear flaps for IEDs. She invented the Pietà with those flaking palms, her nerves burning inside out, her hands flaking open and bleeding. How many of you are in there? They say to my tail. And probing, I feel the pressure build on my spine like to birth and steps underfoot. Ever heard of Pietà? Mercy, mercy. Yes, we'll show you some mercy, sir. Right away, right this way. I'm going to read 2 poems from pandemic years, so more recent, although it seems like an eternity. Combined with a discovery I made when taking my family back to Abruzzo, which is where the Rigiacorte clan comes from. The discovery was of these ancient little huts, stone huts without mortar that line a shepherding trail, dry stone huts. And so in this poem, the American Mastodon shelters in place a dry stone hut. You wouldn't think I'd fit my 4/4 in ivories, much less my haunches, so much afterthought. But don't I fold in nice and root down low as mineral ore, snug in a dark, secret vein. And you're there with me, all mineral, unminably precious. You wouldn't think we'd want to come out. We'd want rather to root deeper down, where this place wants to collect, to keep us for its own, living or dead. No matter in us so irreducible, it wouldn't keep turning us over with its fingers of dirt, over and over with gravel, over with karst and marl, drip by drip, to make us wax up in the subterrane, like replicas of ourselves. But we don't let it, baby. We burst out again to find all the trees gone animal, released into the wrong habitat, but more beautiful, the calcite moving in herds and the hills tossing their manes. The moment we unfold back into our own true size, I count the blues running down your arms, your neck, and you count the veins in my arms and neck to be sure it's us. When we regain our own right true size, the dome of earth shudders like the first trillionth of a second. Racing from us greens, terebinthine bursted, racing from us whites, acetylene cracked and racing, cerise streaking, open the uncompacted trillionths when we come out of the stone hut, all agleam, you and I, and just as enormous as beads. So along with sheltering in place, I thought of re-entering the world. So this is American Mastodon dreams his re-entry. I float between trusses to an airlock and signal, I want in. But my father, overseeing from the cupola, only shakes his head and points. So I tug my way to the next airlock, to which, from his window, my father wags his finger, waves me along. Is it enough of a life floating out here between the station and the world? I look over at a whirl of white and want to dip my hand in hurricane force, name it. But soon I'll run out of airlocks, I think. My fingers weak with grasping, I signal at the third and look over where my father mouths a no. I remember as a boy riding this man's back to hunt for lupini clams in the wide shallows of the Adriatic, his legs floating behind him. Then on my own legs floating behind me, clawing in the sand. We each filled our pockets, our cheeks too, with the striped shells before emptying them into the blue bucket on the beach. No bitterer now than then, but playtime is over, he says, as my oxygen wanes. I'm no pretend astronaut, but one in earnest with an entire orbit to care for and a few storms to raise. Two more. What do I want to tell you about this? So Mastodon needs groceries. It goes on a grocery run. I want you to know there really was a person named Mr. Wise. I didn't invent it for the poem. There is some violence in here, I guess I will warn you. American Mastodon makes a grocery run. I read, if this flag offends you, then you need a history lesson. And admit, I want history to lessen, to lower my chin permanent, where this one strap of muscle's been waiting eons in my jaw, to grow taut again, tie my brain up tight in a sheep skull, nearly thinkless. I think this head's poor shelter, as Mr. Wise taught his 7th grade every fall on the workings of the speculum oris, through which as slaves we'd have been force-fed. Did we clench our jaw too tight against it then? The thumb screws threadwise widening, or only now do I imagine the tongue pressed back, gagged by a funnel, making my body trough. Nothing inalienable to the bumper sticker, any more than to those ship surgeons who found no obstacle in a shut mouth and no bit of human cordage that couldn't be loosened with a little nerve. So this last one, I'll read off the screen because my vision is suffering. Maybe I'll show you this first. On the cover of this book, which Tupelo took such good care of, Christina, you and David, this is a picture of a kinetic sculpture by the Dutch artist Theo Janssen. It's all wind-powered. It roams the beaches. So strandbeest, meaning beach creature. In this last poem I'll read, the mastodon and the beast, strandbeest, meet. It doesn't go very well, but it had to happen. American Mastodon, beast to beast. Your will's never sapped, but you will crumble in on your own knees, your spine eventually torque and split. That is something. And in the meantime, it is really something to see that elliptical swing of your forelegs and soft planting of each foot down, each foot down. Dumb self-herder, you crashword pneumatic tube work of a beast, you core of blind marching. How I envy the elliptical swinging of your calf tubes and all your soft-planted feet. Though you will never know the knot inside, nor drag the bloodless meat of each foot, laughing through gelid water, having followed the glow of plankton through thinning waves, hand in hand with someone you love, you'll never know the blood rushes and sweet undoing of that knot to regain feeling in your toes. Your maker thought of you long before you were born, nearly lost to the world's blind notions, lovingly, desperately tuned your design, bend in the tape for a blowtorch, and with jig work turned out excellent joints for you, cell by cell. He thought of that soap drip to flush the grit and salt from each joint, thought of a proboscis like mine, whose suction choked by water would flip the switch, send you back to terra firma. Could you care less to be pulled back, or would you just as soon be dragged out to some shelf, then dropped, weightless to the seafloor, ground to splinters? As though gravity could grow with rising water, acidity rising, who knew, to usher our decline, along with the colossal sperm whale, whose echolocation can rupture a human eardrum and collapse human lungs. You know they call swimming with sperm whales suicidal, such curious giants who merely to say to one another, behold, this small creature kills us with one crack of an inmost chord. Pierceable heart, pierceable drums, these are the things, you mute scaffold, faithless pilgrim, impossibly remote to you, pierceable eye that lifts to take in the lesser lights as a depth and the greater lights as shallows, to enter with all crests between and judge the speed of the world's approach, just how much it wants to know you or doesn't. You gorgeous imbecile, how I envy you, the nearness of your maker, Janssen harried by wind, who hates the wind but pays every homage, shrining up sails for you to it. What I'd give just once to drift like you under the sails of myself, sails sensitive enough to catch any wisp already. Now, if she whisper me a number, any number, I'd shed my winter weight, all weight, if she whisper my name into my giant ear, and we'd evolve us a daughter, her name a stratum of rock enough to hold our bones. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. What a journey, that last poem especially. Wow. Thank you so much. And of course, thank you everybody tonight for the second night of Tupelo Books weekend, which included tonight Sean Singer, Iliana Rocha, Lawrence Raab, and Nicholas Rigiacorte, who we just heard. And the night prior was Chloe Hunnam, Corey Van Lindingham, Maggie Queenie, Michael Height with Cutter Strebe, Cindy Savitt, and Tyler Mills. And what a weekend. Thank you so much, everybody. And I'm going to hand the mic back over to my co-host, Cassandra, for the open mic section of the show.
Well, I've prevailed upon Christina Marie Darling to give us one of her pieces. I thought it was very fitting after she's helped curate and edit and done extraordinary things with these amazing Tupelo writers this weekend. So she's promised that she'll read us a piece and then we'll go into open mic. So Christina.
Well, I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you to Balm for hosting this wonderful weekend of poetry, hybrid text, and innovation. It has been such a pleasure to see our authors' work showcased, and thank you to our distinguished Tupelo Press authors for such extraordinary readings. It is an absolute honor and pleasure to read alongside you. So I'm going to read two very short little micro fictions. When I was working on these, I was spending a lot of time at the American Academy in Rome. And so these questions of translation and mistranslation frequently come up in the poems. And so the first piece is called Sad Film with Subtitles. The first scene was nearly untranslatable. Velocity and the little ache at the very back of the throat. Were we seeing a design in the narrative when all that was really there was the hand on the waist, the movement of a white dress in the middle distance? And for once, they traveled to a country that spoke another language entirely, without so much as a miniature dictionary to lessen the shock. To lose that thread the moment the wind picks up, to no longer be able to trace the progress of an idea or the line that reason makes in the hot white sand, was to somehow always be on holiday. Still, they both had to wonder what the gatekeeper thought of them, their mouths that empty, not even a cough to break the silence. And so I'm going to read one more little short poem that goes with the previous one. This is called The Tears of Things. I thought you'd never ask about the flowers. You see, the gatekeeper's ardor has begun to fade. I trace sweetheart letters you've sent by post, count little stitches on the sleeve of a shirt. This is how I sharpen the needle. Then you cut the thread. Now the leave-taking, the carte de visite. You're always cruelest when I arrive with gifts. So what do you like better, my dress or its shadow? What do you like better, the velvet box or the nothing inside? What I meant to say, the field is just a field. The snow is just snow. When I say your name, all the world goes out. Thank you.
Wonderful. I do love that little ache at the very back of the throat. Some really gorgeous, gorgeous lines. Thank you for reading for us. I did ask Christina at the last minute, so I'm very pleased that she was able to do that. We're going to have Bob from His Famous Kitchen. He gave us the goulash poem last in open mic, not too many open mics ago. And he's going to be back from his kitchen giving us a poem. Bob, is it information today or is it something else?
It's something that's over 40 years old and it's not information. Although everything is information, but it's not information.
It's vintage. That's what it is.
They passed the cup into the void. They passed the charm across her face. Her mouth was closed. She didn't breathe. Her eyes stared into space. They thought she knew about the sign, about the trees that swam and sank, and swam and sank and swam again, then floated to the further bank. They passed the charm across her face. They said the words they always knew. Her mouth was closed. She didn't breathe. The silence grew.
That's amazing. Kind of creepy, but amazing. I love it. I love the silence growing, but it's overtaking me. Next we have the brilliant Susan Dickey, who's going to read for us. Susan.
Yeah, hi. Cassandra, thank you for putting me on the open mic list. I appreciate it. Now I've lost the poem. Let's see here.
You have your camera off, but that's okay.
Oh, I'll turn it on.
We love to see your beautiful face when you read.
Yeah.
Hooray! That's what I like to see. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Here it is. This poem is from a collection that I'm writing in memory of my beloved Ralph, who died last September. This one's kind of a dark one. The other, there's a lot of witty ones too. So. Found. Marco fathered Hyman, Hyman fathered Ralph. Ralph fathered Allie. Allie mothered Noah. Noah took Ralph's hand and led Ralph to the birdseed can. Ralph never knew who fathered Marco. And what of the others, the fathers, the mothers from Iasi, Romania, Bessarabia, Moldova? Today I found ancestral names. Marco Markovitz ben Moses Markovitz Rebecca Solomon. Moses Markovitz ben Jakob Yankel Markovici Markowitz. Leah Alea Elizabeth Rabinovitz Rosenblatt. Jakob Yankel Markovici ben Chaim Mordechai Markovici, Celia Labwatis Leibowitz. What happened to descendants who stayed behind, who didn't follow Marco and little Hyman to Orchard Street, Manhattan? Were they on the death train from Iasi to Colarasi, or massacred in death camps, Transnistria, Pecora, Vapniarka? Were they shot to death in Bogna-Bakova, or did they die slowly of typhus in Mogalib?
Wow, that was dark, but it was wonderful. That line, what happened to the descendants who stayed behind? Yeah, it's an amazing work. Thank you, Susan.
Yes, you're welcome.
And our final open micer is the amazing Patricia. So I think someone called you Patty in the chat, so I'm just going to...
That's Cindy.
Cindy. Of course it was Cindy.
Cindy's not going to read? I'm surprised.
No, she read yesterday. So
okay. Okay, I'm going to make it fast. I have 2 Mother's Day poems.
Excellent.
In this photo, you were my mom, a bride with movie star glamour. It was taken at a studio. Where? I don't know. When you were alive, we never discussed this or anything else. Now it's too late. Your quality of life, a girl's dream gone wrong, a marriage reinforced by regret. You wanted financial security, but Dad never did get that promotion. He drank at the bar after work, and the bookie used to call the house. Money and in-laws, Molotov cocktails served on anniversary platters. You lived inside a hardened shell. Sarcastic smiles bared your teeth. We've never discussed the future or my needs. I had to learn how to be myself, made one mistake after another. I never knew I was to be your caregiver. Now it's too late. The milk on the floor, a stain indelible and cracked. The photo aged like the strain on our relationship. Your legacy met its detour. Tears have turned to salt. History left another voicemail. Forgiveness tied to a price tag that I could afford. I put on my mother's shoes and walked on city streets, crossed asphalt and cobblestone gutters, climbed various staircases to subways, schools, jobs, apartments. Sometimes took elevators when available. I felt the leather tighten, heard souls sigh. Pain rose up vascular roadways, a headache signaled to action. Her past, a telepathic rerun. I already knew how it would end. Emotions created her whorls and lines, and no 2 fingerprints were alike. Unanswered questions stepped on anger and grief, wondered why I still shrink in my own shoes. Thanks.
Wow, thank you so much. I love the literal walking around in your mother's shoes. That kind of empathy is amazing. So Mark, back to you.
Well, guys, thank you so much for this wonderful Tupelo Books weekend. I got to thank, of course, Chloe, Corey, Maggie, Michael, Cotter, Cindy, and Tyler for the first night, which was last night, and tonight, Sean, Iliana, Larry, and Nicholas. Thank you so much for joining us and making this a wonderful Tupelo Books weekend. And to sort of conclude today, I decided I'm going to read you guys a prose poem that I just translated by Klaus Merz, the Swiss poet, that's forthcoming in the fall from White Pine Press and Audible Blue. This poem's called Official Announcement. Yes, Mrs. Yown, I admit it. Since this morning, the 2nd of April, when I initiated the bankruptcy case against you, and you visited me personally to discuss a debt restructuring moratorium, I haven't had a wink of sleep. On my part, I too have unexpectedly fallen into bankruptcy. In short, I was taken aback on the spot by your uncanny resemblance to my wife, with whom I have been married over 20 years, mostly happy ones. Everything that binds me to you is almost fated from that first encounter and has confounded me to such an extent that I shall now require, as a reality check, and in order that we might both come back to ourselves again, to kindly request on my part a moratorium. Would you grant me, for the duration of the proceedings, to inconspicuously rest gently by your side? Thank you, everyone, for a wonderful night. And well, we'll see you next weekend, where we have our Southeast Asian crew, Indran Amathayagam, Kashina Singh, Anita Nadal, and Sophia Naz. So please join us for that. But thank you so much tonight, and we'll see you on the flip side. Lots of love and poetry. Good night.
Good night.